I have worked as the groundskeeper for Thornfield Cemetery for 7 years. I inherited the position from my father, who worked the same job for 31 years before a stroke forced him into early retirement. The job came with a small cottage at the edge of the cemetery grounds, a perk I once considered fortunate. My name is Nathan Carver, and I am 32 years old. I live alone. I have always preferred the company of the dead to the demands of the living. There is peace in maintaining these grounds, in trimming the grass around headstones, and ensuring that the final resting places of the townspeople are treated with dignity. Thornfield is a small town in rural Pennsylvania, population just under 3,000. The cemetery sits on a hill overlooking the town, surrounded by dense forest on 3 sides. The oldest graves date back to the late 1700s. The cemetery spans nearly 40 acres, and I know every inch of it. What I am about to describe began in late September, during what the locals would later call the storm of the century. But that name is wrong. It was not a storm at all. It was something announcing its arrival. The first unusual lightning strike occurred on a Tuesday around 9 at night. The sky opened up with a ferocity I had never witnessed. The rain came down in sheets so thick I could not see the cemetery from my cottage window. The thunder was constant, a rolling barrage that shook the walls. I had seen plenty of storms in my years at Thornfield, but something about this one felt different. The air had a strange quality to it, a thickness that made my ears feel pressurized, like being underwater. My dog, a 12-year-old retriever named Bo, refused to leave the corner of the bedroom. He whimpered throughout the night. Then came the first strike. A blinding flash of light illuminated the entire cemetery, followed by a crack of thunder so loud it rattled the windows. I rushed to the back door and looked out toward the old section of the cemetery, near the forest line, where I had seen the flash originate. Through the rain, I could make out a small fire burning in the grass near the oldest graves. I waited for the rain to extinguish it, which it did within minutes. I made a mental note to check the area in the morning for damage. Over the following 3 weeks, lightning struck the exact same spot 46 more times. I know the exact number because I began counting after the 5th strike, which occurred during a minor thunderstorm 3 days later. Each time, the bolt hit the same patch of ground near the old Whitmore family plot, a cluster of graves from the 1800s that sat at the very edge of the maintained grounds. I called the electric company to ask if there was something underground that might be attracting the strikes, maybe old wiring or a buried metal structure. They sent someone out who found nothing unusual. I asked an old-timer at the hardware store if he had ever heard of anything like this. He just shook his head and told me to stay away from that spot during storms. By the time the 47th strike hit on the night of October 15th, I had developed a ritual. When the sky darkened and the thunder began to roll, I would watch from my back window, waiting. And every time, without fail, the lightning found the same spot, the same 10-foot circle of earth. After the 47th strike, the storm stopped, not just in Thornfield, but throughout the entire region. I checked the weather reports obsessively for days, but there was nothing. Clear skies, no precipitation expected. The meteorologists on the local news seemed almost confused by the sudden change. It was October the 22nd when I first noticed something had changed. A cool autumn day with the leaves at their peak color. I was making my rounds through the old section, checking for storm damage I might have missed when I came upon the Whitmore plot. The grass within the strike zone was dead. This was not surprising. I had expected the repeated electrical damage to kill the vegetation. What I had not expected was what had replaced it. Growing from the center of the dead patch was something I initially mistook for a fungus. It was about 6 inches tall, pale gray in color, with a texture that reminded me of wet clay. It had no discernible shape, just a lumpy protrusion from the blackened earth. I knelt down to examine it more closely and immediately recoiled. It was warm. Not warm like something sitting in the sun, but warm like flesh, like living tissue. I stood there for several minutes, trying to convince myself it was just some unusual mushroom or growth I had never encountered before. The cemetery was old, after all, and strange things sometimes grew in old soil. But deep down, I knew this was different. This was wrong. Over the following week, the growth changed rapidly. By October 24th, it had doubled in size, now standing about a foot tall and spreading outward in all directions. The color had shifted from gray to a sickly pinkish hue, and the surface had developed what looked almost like veins. Thin, dark lines running beneath the outer layer. By October 26th, I could no longer deny what I was seeing. The growth had taken on a vaguely organic shape. Not human, not animal, but something that suggested biology. There were protrusions that might have been limbs, bulges that could have been joints, and the warmth had increased. Standing near it, I could feel heat radiating from its surface like a low fever. I called the county agricultural extension office. They told me it was probably just an unusual fungal bloom and suggested I pour salt on it. I called the state environmental agency, but they put me on hold for 45 minutes before disconnecting. How do you explain to anyone that something is growing in your cemetery that feels alive in a way that plants and fungi should not feel alive? On October 28th, I went to observe the growth after dark. It was around 11 at night, and I had been unable to sleep, my mind racing with questions I could not answer. I pulled on my boots and jacket and walked out to the Whitmore plot with only a flashlight to guide me. What I found made me drop the flashlight and stumble backward into a headstone. The growth was glowing. A faint bioluminescence pulsed from within its mass, a soft blue-green light that reminded me of deep-sea creatures I had seen in documentaries. But that was not what made me run. It was moving, not growing, not expanding, but moving. The surface rippled and shifted like something was stirring beneath it. One of the limb-like protrusions flexed slightly, curling inward like a finger testing its range of motion. I ran back to my cottage and locked every door and window. I did not sleep that night, or the night after. The wildlife around the cemetery began to behave strangely in the days that followed. The birds disappeared first. The cemetery had always been home to crows, sparrows, and various songbirds. But by the end of October, the trees were silent. I would walk the grounds in complete stillness. No birdsong, no rustling in the underbrush. Then the deer started appearing at the forest edge, not running through the property as they usually did, but standing at the tree line, dozens of them, staring toward the Whitmore plot. They would stand there for hours, motionless, their eyes fixed on something I could not see. When I approached them, they did not flee. They did not even acknowledge my presence. They just kept staring. Bo, my dog, refused to go outside anymore. The old retriever would stand at the back door, hackles raised, growling at something in the direction of the old graves. I had never seen him like this, not in 12 years. Then I noticed changes in the residents of Thornfield. It started small. The woman at the grocery store who always chatted with me about the weather now stared at me with blank eyes and said nothing. The old men who gathered at the coffee shop every morning sat in silence, instead of arguing about politics and sports. Children who used to play in the park across from the cemetery now stood at the fence, watching, always watching. I had a conversation with my neighbor, a retired teacher named Eleanor Price, who had lived in Thornfield her entire life. I asked her if she had noticed anything strange lately. She smiled at me in a way that made my skin crawl. "Strange," she said. "No, Nathan, nothing strange. Everything is exactly as it should be. Have you visited the Whitmore plot lately? You really should. It is beautiful." I never saw Eleanor again after that conversation. Her house sat dark and empty, her car still in the driveway. Against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I returned to the Whitmore plot on November 2nd. I told myself I needed to understand what was happening. I needed to see how far the growth had progressed. It was no longer a growth. The thing standing in the strike zone was now roughly 8 feet tall and vaguely humanoid in shape. 2 arms, 2 legs, a bulbous mass that might be a head. The surface had hardened into something like skin, still that sickly pink color, but now stretched tight over what appeared to be bones beneath. Or something like bones. It had no face. The head was smooth and featureless, just a curved surface of flesh-colored material that swiveled slowly as I approached, as if sensing my presence without eyes or ears. I felt an overwhelming compulsion to walk toward it, to touch it, to press my palm against that warm surface and let it know me. The urge was almost irresistible, a pull in my chest that made my feet move forward against my will. I stopped myself only when I noticed something at the base of the creature. Scattered in the dead grass were personal items. A watch, a pair of glasses, a wedding ring. Things that belonged to people. Things that might have been all that was left of them. I ran again. The dreams began. On November 3rd. Every night, without fail, I dreamed of the creature. In my dreams, it was always standing in the cemetery, but the cemetery had changed. The headstones had grown tall and twisted, reaching toward a sky filled with more lightning. Endless bolts striking the ground around the creature, feeding it, making it larger. In the dreams, the creature spoke to me. Not with words, not with sound, but with something that bypassed my ears entirely and planted itself directly in my mind. It told me things I did not want to know. It told me about hunger, about waiting, about the 47 strikes. There were 47 keys turning in 47 locks. It told me It had been sleeping beneath the soil of this cemetery for longer than the town has existed, longer than humans have walked this continent. The storms were its alarm clock. It told me it was grateful to finally be awake. People began to vanish from Thornfield. On November 5th, I came into town to find Main Street nearly deserted. The shops were open, the lights were on, but there were no customers, no employees. Cars sat in parking spaces with their engines running. Coffee grew cold in cups on cafe tables. I found a woman standing in the middle of the street, staring towards the hill where the cemetery sits. I recognized her as one of the librarians, a young woman named Iris, who had always been kind to me. I called her name, but she did not respond. When I touched her shoulder, she turned to look at me with eyes that had changed. The pupils had expanded to fill nearly the entire iris. Black pools that reflected nothing. She smiled at me, and her smile was too wide. It stretched past the natural limits of her face. "It wants to meet you, Nathan," she said. "It has been waiting for you. You take such good care of its garden." She walked past me toward the cemetery, and I did not follow. That is when I understood. The cemetery is not just its resting place. It is its garden. Every body buried in that soil, every person who has been laid to rest in Thornfield Cemetery for the past 200 years has been feeding it. The nutrients, the organic matter, the slow decomposition of human remains has been nurturing something in the earth, keeping it alive, helping it grow even in its dormant state. And now that it is awake, it needs fresh sustenance. I found more items near the creature when I forced myself to return on November 6th. More watches, more jewelry, more clothing. But also something else. Bones. Human bones. Stripped clean and white. Scattered in an expanding circle around the base of the now 12-foot creature. The creature has grown another pair of arms. Its featureless head has begun to show indentations where eyes might form. It no longer stands still, but sways gently, as if moved by a wind I cannot feel. I sought out Father Timothy Ashford, the elderly priest who runs the only church in Thornfield. I found the old man in his church, kneeling before the altar, muttering prayers in a language I did not recognize. When I approached, Father Ashford looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. "You are still yourself," the priest said. "How? How are you still yourself?" I did not understand the question, but Father Ashford explained. The creature has been calling to everyone in Thornfield, pulling at their minds, drawing them toward it. Most people cannot resist. They hear its voice in their dreams, in their waking hours, in every moment of silence. It offers them peace. It offers them purpose. It offers them a place in its new body. Father Ashford has been praying non-stop for 4 days, using his faith as a shield against the call. But he is weakening. He can feel the pull growing stronger. I asked why I could resist, and the priest shook his head. "Perhaps because you have lived among the dead for so long," he said. "Perhaps you understand something the rest of us do not, that death is final, that what is gone should stay gone. The creature offers eternal life, but what it truly offers is eternal consumption. It does not give, it only takes." Before I could ask more questions, Father Ashford stood and walked toward the door of the church. "I cannot fight it any longer," he said. "I am sorry, Nathan. You are the only one left who can choose. Please choose wisely." The priest walked out into the night, toward the cemetery. I did not stop him. The following days were a waking nightmare. I was alone in Thornfield. Every resident had either vanished or walked willingly to the cemetery. I found the town frozen in the middle of ordinary life. Meals half-eaten, televisions playing to empty rooms, cars parked at odd angles in the middle of streets. I knew I should leave. I should get in my truck and drive as far away as possible and never look back. But something kept me here. Not the creature's pull. I was certain of that, because I felt nothing like what Father Ashford described. What kept me here was a sense of responsibility I could not explain. I have maintained this cemetery for 7 years. My father maintained it for 31 before that. The Carver family has been caring for the dead of Thornfield for 3 generations. I could not abandon them now, even if what had risen from the soil was beyond my understanding. On November 9th, I made my choice. I would not run. I would not submit. I would face the creature and learn what it truly wanted. I walked to the Whitmore plot at sunset. The creature has grown to nearly 20 feet tall, a towering mass of flesh and bone that no longer resembles anything human. It has developed more limbs, 7 or 8 of them, each ending in hands that open and close slowly. Its head has taken on definition. Not a human face, but something else. A configuration of features that suggests eyes and a mouth, but in arrangements that make my head hurt to look at directly. The ground around it is littered with remains. Not just bones now, but partially consumed bodies. People from town frozen in the process of being absorbed, their faces locked in expressions of ecstasy rather than horror. The creature noticed my approach. Its face turned toward me, and for the first time, I heard its voice not in dreams, but in waking reality. It did not speak in words. It spoke in images, in feelings, in memories that were not my own. It showed me the vast, empty darkness before the earth formed. It showed me the long sleep beneath the soil, the centuries of patient waiting, the slow accumulation of power from every body laid to rest above its resting place. It showed me the lightning, the 47 strikes that were not natural phenomena, but the turning of a cosmic key, a signal from somewhere far away that the time for sleeping was over. It showed me what it intends to become, a new God for a new world, a living cathedral of flesh built from the willing faithful of Thornfield and eventually the entire world. And it showed me my place in this new order, the caretaker, the gardener, the one who will tend to its needs as it grows, who will guide new believers to its embrace, who will maintain the garden that will spread from this cemetery to cover the earth. It offered me eternal life, eternal purpose, an end to loneliness and doubt and fear. I thought about my father, who spent his life caring for the dead because he believed in dignity, in respect, in the idea that every person deserves to be remembered and honored even after they are gone. I thought about the people of Thornfield, people who trusted me to maintain their family plots, to trim the grass and place flowers and ensure that their loved ones rested in peace. This is not peace. This is consumption. This is a hunger wearing the mask of salvation. I told the creature no, not with words, because words seemed meaningless in the face of something so vast and ancient. I told it by turning my back and walking away, by refusing to look at the faces of the absorbed, by refusing to feel the pull of its false promises, by refusing to be afraid. The creature did not react with anger. It did not strike me down or force me to submit. Instead, it simply watched me go, its eyes following my retreating form with something that might be patience. It has time. It has all the time in the world. And I am just one man. I left Thornfield that night. I packed only what I could carry, loaded Bo into my truck, and drove away without looking back. The road out of town was clear. No obstacles. No strange figures blocking my path. The creature let me go. As I drove, I watched the rearview mirror. The hill where the cemetery sits was visible against the night sky, and standing at its peak was the silhouette of the creature, now easily visible from miles away, a dark shape against the stars that seemed to grow larger even as I drove further from it. I drove through the night and into the next day, putting hundreds of miles between myself and Thornfield. I did not stop until I reached a motel in a state I barely registered. I sat in the parking lot for an hour, just breathing, just reminding myself that I was still alive, still myself. I am sharing this account because I do not know what else to do. I watch the news obsessively, waiting for reports of a missing town in Pennsylvania, waiting for someone to notice that an entire community has vanished. But there is nothing. No news, no search parties, no concerned family members raising alarms. It is as if Thornfield never existed. I have started to have the dreams again, the creature's voice, patient and calm, reminding me that my place is ready whenever I choose to return, telling me that the garden is growing, that the faithful are multiplying, that soon there will be no corner of the earth that does not hear its call. I think about the 47 lightning strikes. I wonder if there are other places, other sleepers, other ancient things waiting beneath the soil of cemeteries and burial grounds across the world. I wonder if Thornfield was just the first. I am sitting in another anonymous motel room right now, the television playing some late-night program I'm not watching. Bo is asleep at my feet, the old dog finally calm for the first time in weeks. Outside the window, the sky is clear, but in the distance, I can see clouds gathering on the horizon. Dark clouds, storm clouds, and somewhere, faint but unmistakable, I hear the first rumble of thunder. I do not know where I will go next. I do not know if running will save me. But I know one thing for certain. If you live near an old cemetery, and if the storms come, and if the lightning strikes the same spot more than once, do not investigate. Do not be curious. Do not convince yourself there is a rational explanation. Just run. Run and do not look back. Because something is waking up. Something is growing, and it is hungry.